Welcome. Thank you for joining Youth Community Service this evening. I am Maura Uman, the Executive Director of YCS. We are so grateful to each of you for joining us and showing up in support of our youth. We begin with an expression of gratitude and appreciation to the Ramaytush Ohlone peoples on whose territory and heritage we reside. We honor the Indigenous people who lived on and nurtured the land before us. We also invite you to take a moment to acknowledge the loss and suffering that our community has faced during the pandemic we are living through. May those of us who have lost loved ones find courage and solace in their memory. Although gathering together this evening in person with our inspiring speakers would have been a beautiful experience, we are grateful for this virtual space to continue to build community. I hope you will join us for one of the many upcoming events at YCS shared this evening. YCS is very grateful to our event sponsors, Lorraine and Noble Hancock, Stanford Children's Health, Insight Education, Palo Alto Weekly, Palo Alto Online, Reach and Teach, Good Tech and Cause, the Association for India's Development, and our generous host sponsors. For over 30 years, YCS has been driven by our mission to bridge our communities through youth service. And this evening, we are thrilled to bring together the important voices of our local community heroes for an inspiring evening together. We warmly welcome Judge LaDoris Cordelll, the first African-American woman to sit on the Superior Court of Northern California, and author of Her Honor, My Life on the Bench, What Works, What's Broken, and How to Change It. Judge Cordell will be in conversation with three of our very own celebrated authors, Joanna Ho, Tonga Victoria, and Antonio Lopez. They will share inspiring messages from each of their recent publications, providing hope and resilience to us all, especially our youth. In the words of author Joanna Ho, words are power, stories are power. I want young people and adults to know their own power in the world, to be critically conscious and understand their ability to create change. At YCS, we could not agree more. We believe every young person with a heart full of service has a future of meaning and purpose. Tonight is about each of us showing up for our youth, creating space for them to make a difference in our community and inspiring them to be the change they want to see in the world. Your kind donations will support our ongoing work that engages youth annually in over 10,000 hours of service learning. I would like now to introduce YCS donor and volunteer, Harish Ramadas, who will be my co-host this evening. Harish will be sharing important highlights and updates on ways to make financial gifts throughout this evening to support the mission of YCS. Welcome, Harish.
Thank you, Maura, and good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be with you here this evening. My name is Harish, as Maura said. I've been a volunteer with YCS for the last 2 years, and it's such an incredible organization, and it makes it an especially big privilege to be here with you tonight. Now, I started the evening today seeing that YCS has raised $21,000 or so of their goal of $40,000. And before the event even began, the donations started to pour in, and we're already at $24,127. So thank you so much from the bottom of my heart for all your generosity. Now, how this is going to work today evening is you're welcome to make pledges or donations at any point in time through the event, but sometime midway through, maybe in another 20 minutes or so, you will get the opportunity to make pledges for specified amounts, ranging between $2,500 or more if you feel so inclined, all the way down to $125. I know we all have different means and different capacities to be donating, but I appreciate everyone's contribution in their own special way. At the very end of the event, I hope you stay on till the end, because we're going to play a fun little game where everyone gets a chance to chip in $20 sums, and you may do so multiple times if you so wish. And it's going to be a fun little game with a special treat for one lucky donor this evening. So stay with us through till the end, and take the next 20 minutes or so to think about how generous you think you might be willing to be this evening. Do you think you can go up to 2,500? Do you think you could go even beyond that? Or we all have our own capacities. Think about how much you can open up your hearts to this wonderful organization. And I will see you at the other side of 20 minutes or so. So now it is my great pleasure and privilege to welcome Jasmine Capadia, who is a Palo Alto native. She is 17 years old, Asian American, and she will recite her poem, Here and Also Everywhere.
Here and Also Everywhere, after Aili Fang. Tell me again about the dream where home is not far, where we know the roads by heart, can smell the weather changes in the air. How it was late and we lost sleep trying to keep it all safe. The roasting pig, skin crisp and crackly, belly sliced open. How all of this will ruin us. The wilderness and the sharp things our bodies became, had to become. This gradual process, how it will cut us up from the inside out, turn us inconsolable. These are non-existent shadows, our untraceable tracks, our whispered stories. Tell me we'll always be used to it, perpetually belonging.
Bob, you're on mute. Sorry. Let's back up just a bit. Thank you.
Forgive me. Thank you, Jasmine, for sharing your beautiful poem on belonging. For more works by Jasmine, please visit her on Instagram at JazzyMoons, JazzyMoons. My name is Bob Miyahara, and I am the board president of YCS. It's an honor to welcome you to our annual spring fundraiser. I've always enjoyed this event because it's not only an opportunity to hear inspirational stories, but to celebrate the rich and diverse members of the YCS community. This year, we have an extraordinary panel of speakers that are closely intertwined with our core mission at YCS, so we are all in for a wonderful evening. YCS was founded on the idea that great good comes from the simple act of helping others. While the good of an act might be obvious to a beneficiary, the impact of helping another, because it empowers us, because it creates social bonds, because it broadens our worldview, can be a transformative experience for youth. As an organization that has been doing this for over 30 years, a major question for YCS is, how do we perpetuate a single act of helping others and make it something more? While I'm not sure that we or anyone have a definitive, immutable answer, we're starting to recognize that this cycle perpetuates when it's anchored in an authentic sense of self. It requires the affirmation that everyone is entitled to their space. It demands that when that space is not there, we advocate for change. It is reinforced with a powerful idea that everyone can be an agent of change to better the community. Our speakers today, Judge LaDoris Cordelll, Tonga Victoria, Joanna Ho, and Antonio de Jesus Lopez, demonstrate how meaningful lifelong service can be sustained when it's connected to a sense of one's unique, authentic self. While we've come to know our panelists because they are authors, it's their backstories and their everyday work in our communities for which YCS truly celebrates them. We'll hear from a trailblazing community leader and Superior Court judge. As we celebrate the confirmation of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson as a Supreme Court Justice, it's clear that historic moment in American history was only made possible because of those like Judge Cordell, who paved the path before her. We'll hear from a Pacific Islander American who gave voice to her struggles with her dual identity through her writing. And now her voice has allowed her to be an advocate for a Pacific Islander community on issues like housing, education, and literacy. We'll hear from a New York Times bestselling children's author who drew inspiration from her experiences as a Chinese American youth and wanting to connect with similarly marginalized kids. But she's also an educator who chose her path, in her own words, to disrupt systems of inequity and racism in education. And we'll hear from an award-winning poet who uses poetry to reframe the immigrant narrative through the realities of inequity and the harm of exclusion, based on his experiences growing up in East Palo Alto, who now fights gentrification as an East Palo Alto City Council member. These past years have been tumultuous for America, but these times have allowed us to delve deeper and begin addressing systemic issues that ail us all. Within that context, YCS continues to offer its core youth leadership and service learning-based programming. But to remain relevant has required that we embrace all that we do with a greater authenticity in how we understand the needs of the community and how we reinforce a sense of self in our youth and in how we equip our youth to take on the challenges before them. So we look to the stories like the ones that we'll be hearing tonight for inspiration. We look to the community and our partners for their continued and evolving collaboration. And we look to you, our supporters, for making everything that we do possible financially. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to turn the stage back to Maura. I think you might be on mute, Maura.
We're all trying to be so careful. Thank you. Thank you, Bob, for your leadership and steadfast support for YCS and being a wonderful mentor to me. We are inspired by the new publications by our featured guests, each of them offering experiences, influences, and impact on the dream of possibility, unity, and collectivism. I want to introduce three of our speakers today. Joanna Ho is a New York Times bestselling and award-winning author of many books for children. Her debut picture book, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, won the Golden Kite Award. Playing at the Border, A Story of Yo-Yo Ma, was an Ezra Jack Keats honor book. She recently released Eyes That Speak to the Stars, and her upcoming books include One Day, The Wave Riders, Say My Name, Eyes That Weave the World's Wonders, and When Light Divides. Her debut young adult novel, The Silence That Binds Us, will be released soon. Joanna is a writer and educator with a passion for anti-bias, anti-racism, and equity work. She holds a BA in psychology from the University of Pennsylvania and a master's from the Principal Leadership Institute of Berkeley. She has been an English teacher, a dean, the designer of an alternative to prison program, and a professional development creator, partnering with educational leaders around the country. She is currently the vice principal of East Palo Alto Academy, where she survives on homemade chocolate chip cookies, outdoor adventures, and dance parties with her kids. Keep your eyes open for more books to come. Tonga Victoria is the daughter of Sione Fakalata and Eleanoa Kelu. Tonga Victoria is a first-generation Tongan American who grew up in East Palo Alto. During her undergraduate studies, Tonga Victoria spent 2 summers teaching reading and writing in the Kingdom of Tonga to students at Queen Salote College and Tupou College, an experience that was instrumental as both an emerging organizer and writer. Since then, Tonga Victoria has served over 500 East Palo Alto youth, over 300 Pacific Islander college students across America, and supported urban and rural development in the island nation of Tonga. Currently, Tonga Victoria serves as the Communications Director of Anamatangi, a Silicon Valley-based grassroots organization advancing social impact for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders in the American diaspora. She also serves as the Interim Program Director for Take the Mic, a language and media arts initiative that offers project-based training in media, research, and writing via community-developed curriculum. Changa Victoria is the CEO founder of Sword House, Inc., a campaign-based communications agency, and authored Book 1 of the young adults urban fiction trilogy, Hyphen America. She is currently pursuing a graduate certificate in literary representation from UCLA Extension, and of her many responsibilities, being a wife and a mother to her 1-year-old daughter, Ocean, is life's meaning. Antonio Lopez is a poetician working at the intersection of academia, poetry, and politics. He holds degrees from Duke University, Rutgers Newark, and the University of Oxford. He is pursuing a PhD in modern thought and literature at Stanford University. He also serves as a district representative for State Senator Josh Becker, District 13. His debut poetry collection, Gentefication, was selected by Gregory Pardlow as the winner of the 2019 Levi's Prize in Poetry. Antonio is currently fighting gentrification in his hometown as the newest and youngest council member of the city of East Palo Alto. Welcome. It now gives me great joy to invite YCS board member Linda Lenoir, retired school nurse, presently working for the Herd Alliance at Stanford as a suicide prevention trainer in schools. Linda is a longtime advocate for YCS promoting youth physical and mental health and supporting YCS's efforts to help youth develop internal values and skills to be compassionate and empathetic and realize the importance of each of them to be a bridge for peace and well-being. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, Maura. I'm honored to introduce my friend, Judge LaDoris Cordelll. I've admired and looked up to Judge Cordell for years. Although I'll be sharing many accomplishments Judge Cordell has achieved over the years, it does not speak to the person she is. Judge Cordell has been ahead of her time, guiding us to help youth develop their innate skills to be caring, compassionate, empathetic persons in their family, school, community, and beyond. One case where Judge Cordell was sentencing 2 youth who were convicted of vandalism, including racial slurs, speaks to the type of person she is. The youth were directed to write a letter to the victim. They were given a 30-day jail term, which would be suspended on the condition that they pass a college course on third world culture. So, who is Judge LaDoris Cordelll? She's been called a multidimensional individual, which I think will become clear as I share some facts about her life. She's the great-granddaughter of a slave and a native of Pennsylvania. She has resided in California since 1971. In 1972, she graduated from Stanford Law School and opened the first ever law practice in East Palo Alto. Judge Cordell was Assistant Dean for Student Affairs at Stanford from 1978 to 1982. She left her legacy at Stanford Law School by enrolling more Black and Latinx students than any other top law school in the country. She made history again when in April 1982, Governor Jerry Brown appointed her to the Municipal Court of Santa Clara County, becoming the first African-American woman to sit on the municipal court in Northern California. In 1988, Judge Cordell overwhelmingly won election to the Superior Court of Santa Clara County, becoming the first African-American woman to sit on the Superior Court in Northern California. From 2001 and 2009, Judge Cordell was overseeing diversity and anti-discrimination measures across Stanford University, a special counselor to the president. She co-founded the African American Composer Initiative, which if you have not attended in East Palo Alto, you need to attend, hopefully a concert this coming year, where you will be filled with the sound of inspiring, hopeful, and joyful music. An author, artist, vocalist, and pianist, Judge Cordell remains in California with her partner and is a proud mother of 2 daughters and 5 grandchildren. Her latest accomplishment in 2021 is an open and thought-provoking memoir about her 19 years as a judge in Santa Clara County. In her honor, Judge Cordell shared vivid stories of the cases that came through her courtroom in covering the strength, flaws, and changes in our courts that were urgently needed. Kathleen M Sullivan, former dean of Stanford Law School, proclaims the memoir as a brave, profound, and affecting book that combines wisdom, candor, wit, and humanity in equal measure. Her honor is a sterling embodiment of the meaning of judicial independence that should be required reading for the law students and anyone interested in our system of justice. I saw yesterday her honor was named a California Book Award 2022 nonfiction finalist. Congratulations, Judge Cordell. Most recently, you can see and hear Judge Cordell's interview on the PBS NewsHour about the confirmation of Ketanji Brown Jackson. Thank you, Judge Cordell, for being here tonight to support Youth Community Service with their annual fundraiser. I now turn it over to my friend, Judge LaDoris Cordelll.
Thank you so much, Linda. Pleasure being here, and thank you all for joining us for this fundraiser. I'm thrilled to be in conversation with 3 young authors who have written in 3 different genres: a children's book, a book of poemas, and a novel. I have just 2 goals this evening: acquaint you with these talented authors so that you will buy their books, and raise a boatload of money for YCS. So let's begin. But one more thing. Remember, we want all of you to be a part of the conversation by posting your comments, your questions in the chat room. And I promise that we will make every effort to get them all in the conversation. So please post away. So I have a question now for all 3 of our authors. I'm gonna start off with 2 questions, and the first will go to all of you. The second will go to all of you. Then I'm going to focus on each one about your books. So here's my first question. Who are you people? Now, what I mean by that is that we've heard about things you've done. We know about what you're doing, but who are you? What are your roots? Tell us a little bit about your upbringing, family. And I assure you that people get really interested in reading your books when they know more about the authors, not just about things that you can list on your resume. So let's start with, and just a couple of minutes for each of you, because we literally have an hour to get all of this in and have everybody involved. So let's start off with Joanna. Who are you?
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I love this question, Judge Cordell. In 2 minutes or less, I am the daughter of a Taiwanese and a Chinese immigrant, raised by a single mom. I have a younger brother, and we moved around a lot when I was little. So I was born in Minnesota. I lived in Baltimore. I moved here. We lived with a lot of different family members. My mom did not graduate college, and she hustled hard to, she worked at the flea market. She did a lot of things to raise my brother and I. And so I have a lot of privilege in that I have such a powerful woman in my life who has set such a powerful example for me. I am really passionate, as I think you heard, about equity. And I think that it is a space where I am constantly learning and growing. It's a hard space to navigate, I think, not just because the systems themselves are hard, but because the work that we all do is really nuanced and really complex. And there is always a lot to learn. I love chocolate chip cookies. I'm a mom. I love outdoor adventures. I go hiking and camping every chance that I get. And my favorite color is yellow. How's that?
Great. That's just wonderful. And I hope you get to go to Foothills Park because now it's open to everybody. Okay. Tonga Victoria, who are you?
Thank you so much, Judge Cordell, and thank you so much, YCS, for inviting me into this space to be a part of this great event. Again, my name is Tonka Victoria Whakalata. My father's last name is Whakalata. My mother's last name is Helu, and they hail from the island nations of Tonga, Vava'u, and Ha'apai, respectfully. I am born and raised here in East Palo Alto, California, which is the fourth largest population of Tongans outside of the island nation. So growing up here in East Palo Alto, where going to church, you had to speak Tongan, and if you spoke English, we believed in corporal punishment. And so, growing up and having to really straddle the line of being American and then also having to be Tongan, that was really the stroke of influence that I carried with me into college. And then also when I first got to stand on the soil of my mother and father's homeland, so much so that I dropped out of college and decided that I wanted to live there for a year, which now looking back was perhaps the best thing that I've ever done. And it's absolutely something that I support, obviously now with some process and some planning for the students that I served and that I've served throughout the years. I am East Palo Alto through and through, the heart and hood of Trilocon Valley. I've served East Palo Alto. I've served just however way that I can Pacific Islanders, because that really is my heart and my passion. I hope that it shows up in my writing. It also shows up in the way that I present myself and the way that I really show up in spaces, knowing the disproportionate presence, the disproportionate representation that Native Hawaiian Pacific Islanders either have in mainstream, local, state spaces. And so that's really kind of my life's work that I'm doing every day now. So I'm just so blessed. And I am a mom. I also am an auntie to 7 beautiful little boys and girls that I just adore with my entire life. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Antonio de Jesus Lopez, who are you?
Yeah, it's a mouthful. You don't got to say it all the time. I understand. But Judge, thank you so much for hosting us. It's such an honor to just be in this space. Much love to Mora, YCS, my EPA family. Joanna, it's great to see you virtually. Hope to see you in person someday, as well to you, Judge. I'll be quick. I'm a native son of EPA. Like, there's no other place. It's the greatest city on earth. I ride EPA till I die. As unpolitical as that sounds, I have such a love for this city. And a lot of our youth didn't come back, and for a lot of reasons. And for me, I'm a son of Mexican immigrants. I'm a son with the Hyphen movement in his ear, with Black music, Tongans playing rugby in the back of my mind. Like, it is the best place to live. And I feel like my life's work has just become to tell people like stockholders, principals, judges, that like turn your ear to what we do and what we've been doing and what my grandmother's been doing, my fathers who were Mexican immigrants, my moms. And I feel like we have this common tapestry, and we may not even know each other. And I feel like for me, I have that in my DNA of like always caring about somebody, always looking out for somebody. If my neighbor has sugar and I need something for make the soup a little more sweet. I think for me, education has always been a big part of my life, because my dad, my folks didn't go to college, didn't go to high school. Mexico had a different system when they were coming up. And so for me, like, that has always been the vehicle, not just for my own uplift, but my community, my neighborhood. And so I have stumbled myself into becoming this advocate that I didn't want to be. I wanted to, if you look at my kindergarten picture, it's like me in an astronaut suit with my cousin. That was my Antonio 5-year-old. But life happens and we're called to serve. And I am just somebody who is trying his best, most humblest way to speak truth, tell truth to power, to influence, to advocate. And I'm trying to lock arms with as many people who's got that same mission as I do.
Thank you so much. I liked all 3 of you after I read your book. Now I adore you. This is just terrific. So thank you. My second question to all of you. Let me preface it with this. 86 school districts have removed 1,145 different books from their libraries over the last 9 months. Some were permanently removed. Others are being investigated. 4 in 10 removals were tied to political pressure in 8 school districts in Texas, South Carolina, and Georgia. Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye was removed in 11 school districts. Out of Darkness by Ashley Hope Perez was removed in 16 districts. Both books deal with racism and include sexual contact. Maya Kobabe's Genderqueer, a memoir that deals with LGBTQ issues, was removed in 30 school districts. More than 2/3 of the banned books are fiction, not based on true events, but books written about true events, including books about the lives of Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King Jr., Duke Ellington, and Nelson Mandela were also removed. 5 poetry collections have been banned. It's my guess that each of your books will end up on the banned book list, and you should see it as a badge of courage, quite frankly. So to each of you, what is your take on what's happening with the banning of books, and what should we do about it? And I'm going to start with Antonio.
For sure, because I'm jumping to get in on this because we're seeing this every single day. Look, I think there are people in power. It's about race and power and us having a seat at the table. You know, we're not seated at the table, we're on the menu, as the saying goes. And that includes literature, the ability for our young kids to see themselves reflected in textbooks, to consider and to create discussions. There are so few spaces where we can honestly broker conversations about inequality, about power, about disparities. And if we can't do it in a classroom, we are doomed as a society. And that is the lifeblood of civic dialogue, literature. You mentioned Morrison, Baldwin, and we're demonizing these folks. What is happening is very simple. In 2050, a quarter of this country will be Latino. It will be majority minority. It will be African American. It'll be Tongan. It'll be of color. It'll be Asian. And there is a small but vocal minority power block who has its head in the sand, proverbially, and is trying to deny the demographic reality that we are in a multi-ethnic, multiracial country. And we have 2 options. We can either embrace that, rise to the challenges, or when things like George Floyd happen, or when a tsunami hits Tonga, we won't have the intellectual, cultural, artistic tools to tackle it because we shot ourselves in the foot and we didn't give those voices the platform to help us light the way. So we have this fissure. You know, Biden called it Soul America. Dr. King, I'm sure, said it too. We have this soul that we're fighting for about, do we actually value these people as Americans, or are they going to still be second-class citizens in the classroom? And that's where we're at. And we might get banned because we're just being honest about what we see, what our grandparents went through, there are people in EPA who I knocked and said they still wear their Sunday's best when they go to the polls because when their grandparents went to vote, that was an amazing thing. And we have that in our memory. So it's so urgent. And that's what's happening. It's this psychosis that we're having in the country, unfortunately.
Joanna, what's your take?
I'm like, how long do you have? Some statistics about banned books. So there have been 1,145 titles banned. 467 of those have protagonists of color. 379 are LGBTQ plus characters. 283 include some kind of sexual or health content. 247 address race. And so I agree. I second everything Antonio said. The only thing I would change is I don't think that the people banning these books have their head in the sand. I think that's very intentional. They're very aware of the rising power and the rising voices and the rising people who are changing the face literally of this country. And I think it speaks to their understanding, but also our understanding that our stories matter. That the stories we have, that our histories matter, and that when we understand those and when we share those and we know those, we gain power as a result. And that is not what you want if you don't want people to have power. And I think it's a very intentional, very organized move to continue to disenfranchise those who have historically been marginalized through the intentional design of systems to perpetuate it that way. And so in terms of the part of your question of what can we do, I think we continue to tell our stories. We shout them, we tell them and that doesn't necessarily mean they're written For me, it's written. I also love to dance. I mean, whatever it is, however it is that you tell your story, know that it matters and that you continue to tell it. And then I also think the other part of that is we organize. We have to organize in the same intentional way. It's one thing to have conversations like this. It's one thing to have conversations where we talk about how horrible it is, but until we are organized at that same level, I mean, you sit in school board meetings. I sit in school board meetings sometimes, and you can see the level of organization. You can see it in the news clips. I mean, it's the same. If you really tie it back, it's the people who are showing up at these are also tied to billionaires setting the policies. Like, it's not an accident. And it's not like the People's Party is really, the Parents' Party isn't really fighting for parents. It's fighting for maintaining one very narrow understanding of history and of story and of the narrative of this nation. And I think it's imperative for all of us to continue to fight that together.
Great. All right, Tonga Victoria, what's your take?
Yeah, well, I just want to first frame this response to really speak to my community, the Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander community. As someone who has studied social justice and social impact, one of our beloved activists who really led the fight for Hawaiian sovereignty up until she passed away a couple of years ago was Hanani K Trask. And one of the things that she said, which I really took on as both a writer and also as a leader, is that our culture cannot just be ornamental. It cannot just live in this box of being exotic and being performative, and also being physical. You see Pacific Islanders, especially our Polynesian brothers, who straight out of high school, it's either you're going into football or you're going into becoming a security guard or something physical with your body and not your mental. And Hanani K Trask, time and time again, has said that if you want to be cultural, especially in this world that we're living in, this day and age, that you have to be political. That regardless of the society and the systems that are put in place long before we immigrated here, and even in Hawaii, long before the land was stolen from the Hawaiian government, that we have always been political. And there's somewhere in that timeline where we must have taken the road of less resistance, where it's easier to put on a kia and a grass skirt and say that you are Pacific Islander, when it's much, much more than that. And that's what I choose to convey in not just the stories that I write, but also the programming that I have the privilege of facilitating with my youth and the leaders of today, is that in order to be Pacific Islander, you have to be politicized. Now, what does that mean for you individually? What does that mean for your family? That's a conversation that you have to have in your home. But for the most part, and also in being in these classes and these school setting where we're talking about the book publishing industry and just the big five and what they look for, what I've realized is that I'm not writing books to sell books. I'm writing books to start conversations that are not being had, both in the classroom and outside of the classroom. I believe that extracurricular and after-school programs is going to be supplemental and perhaps even transformative to what we need in the education system and in classroom instruction. So that's my take on book ban. And I have had teachers come up to me and asking if they can put their books, my books in their classroom. And I'm just like, all right, if that's what y'all want, but you better be ready for what the students are going to learn about themselves and perhaps even be challenged to think about.
Wow. So, it strikes me that, well, the book banning terrifies me, because if we know our history, we know in Nazi Germany, there was the book, not just banning, but burning of books. So I'm concerned about history repeating. And as far as what can be done, people need to step up and run and get elected to these school boards and turn this stuff around. So it's really the willingness to get involved in civic activities, like Antonio decided, okay, I'm going to run for city council, and he gets elected on the city council. So, which is extraordinary, and I commend you for it. So it's very hard to be in politics today, but you're doing it and making a big difference. So now I'm going to switch to your individual books. I'm going to start with Tonga Victoria. Let's just talk about Hyphen American Part 1. So in maybe less than a minute, you can tell us what's the plot. I've read the book, but let's give our attendees a teaser.
Sure. So the plot of the book is like the 21st century Polynesian American cliche is a girl who doesn't know where she comes from, doesn't know the power behind her name, the power behind her ancestry. She finds out, and the very thing that she inherits as an heirloom is the very thing that is causing climate change in the world, and it's this energy source that weaponize that the elites or the collective have used to weaponize weather and really start global disaster and catastrophe. And so what we see in the trilogy series, which I won't give away, is how she navigates that. And really being in her shoes. What would you do? Would you protect your family inheritance, or in order to save the world, would you destroy that?
So the protagonist's name is Sam Kelly.
Yes.
Is she are you Sam Kelly, sort of?
I mean, kind of, I guess. I mean, definitely she's influenced by not only my experiences, but
Right.
Just the first generation Tongan American experience that I pulled together from my friends, my church cousins, and yeah, those folks for sure.
So Hyphen American is the first of 3 novels. You're going to write a trilogy here, and I'm just stunned. Like, you've got 2 more novels in you. So how can that be? What's going on with that?
I mean, God willing that happens. When I was working, when I was going through the editing cycle, this was something that me and my development editor just kept on going back and forth about. It was like, you can't fit all of this in one book, but you can't, you don't want to, what's the word I'm looking for? Just kind of like keep your audience going. And so a trilogy series is what we decided upon. Am I meeting the timeline? Yeah, who knows? But definitely, I'm there every night when I put my daughter to sleep. I'm in front of the computer and just seeing what comes out of me.
All right, one last question for you. One of your purposes in writing Hyphen American, you said, is to address Tongan literacy. Can you talk, just give us maybe a minute more about what does that mean?
Sure. So based off of my experience working with youth in academia and academic success, is that many of, especially our Tongan males or Polynesian males, read below a 3rd grade reading level. And what I've realized is that it's not that they don't want to read, it's just the literature that's available within their classrooms is something that is not inviting. It's not something that they can sit and say, I see myself, or this inspires me. And so this was something that I wanted to take on as not just an organizer, but also as a leader within my own community. Obviously at the time I was self-proclaimed leader. And so I really wanted to use writing and books, physical books, as a way to really solve for that issue.
Wow. Thank you. I encourage everybody, you've got to read this book, and you'll want to read the follow-ups, because I'm on edge, because I know what happened to Sam Kelly at the very end of the part 1. So again, another teaser, I'll leave it there. I want to move next to Antonio. Antonio, do you have the book with you there, by the way? Great. Hold on one second here. I love the title of your book. It carries over to the first 2 pages. Gentrification, and then we go to, and the Spanish pronunciation is Gentefication, but Gentefication. So will you talk to us, because on the cover it's crossed out, gentrification, and then we have the second word. So talk to us about the difference between the 2.
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Judge. You can go to higher education classrooms, you can go to PBS articles, you can talk to people on the street. We all know what gentrification is. We may have different definitions of who did what, how long it's been, the extent, how we can mitigate it. That's certainly what a lot of city council meetings we spend a lot about. But at the end of the day, we know it's something that is hitting us hard. We have my dad bought the very house that I'm sitting in 1985 and his brothers for $80,000. Now it's like upwards of $1 million. And every freaking week we get a realtor asking, you gonna sell it? You gonna sell it? And I'm sure everybody in the audience feels the same way. So there is this enormous transformation that has happened. And for me, I understand that to speak this language, as I write in my poem, to speak English is to have an empire flood your mouth. We are speaking language that within the bones of this language have been used to enslave people, have been used to colonize people, have been a weapon of power. No question about it. And I've gone to universities that we try to assimilate and try to blend in. And at some point, we just don't fit the box. But there also becomes a point, and it was a point in my life, where I realized that this language is mine too. That the slang that I heard growing up saying, world, rogue, woofing, the Tongan I heard in the back, again, English became like gum at some point in early my life. It became like this moldable clay. And there is an enormous amount of agency. I just remember like DeAndre and Devontae and all these kids freestyling Kanye West. Labor Registration came out. They're just ciphering in like the bathroom, right? And it's recess, right? Just this enormous creativity that was this mitochondria in EPA. And so Gentefication, I cross it out because while I'm trying to move, it's my point of departure, this violent process of displacement, it's also the ingredients I'm working with, the institutions of power, the language, and I'm trying to gentify, which is it's this Spanglish word I made up, which just means to peoplefy, like to make this thing called poetry that was once upon a time, I thought it was just Shakespeare and all these the white dudes that sound weird and don't sound like me. And they're part of my lineage, my genealogy of, and like in Roots when Skip Gates talks, about the contestants, where your roots are, that's our roots too. And for so long, I didn't feel a part of the bookshelf. And this book was my way of saying, we have an enormous contribution in terms of how we put a sentence together, bilingualism, the multi-ethnic melting pot that I grew up in. That's the product of, that's the book. And that's what produced this poem. So it's sort of like a tattoo. It acknowledges where I started and what I'm dealing with. But if the book is anything, it's a signal that we can transform it.
Wow. Antonio, were you born a poet? And by that I mean, was poetry just a part of you from even when you were little? I mean, was it spoken word first and then you're writing poetry? Tell us.
It's funny, like it's sort of with the councilman stuff. Like I feel like it just fell out of my lap. Like I just said one day, I'm gonna run. But then I talked to people from like high school, like, no, that makes sense that you ran. Really? Oh yeah, because you were big on, debate speech and human rights. It's just people know you so well and you think you're all so unique and enigmatic. But no, like you're reading. I'm someone who does wear his heart on the sleeve. That's just who I am. But definitely, like when I think about my music tastes and the stuff I always listen to, Def Jam, The Last Poets, Baraka, like there was always like lyrics that I always paid attention to lyric. And I remember in middle school, we had all these teachers come out, and McNair way back when, and Mr. Nelson would let me like rewrite hip hop songs like Jibs and Akon, and I would like rewrite these songs, and it was to make fun of my classmates. But I didn't realize like it was actually very creative what I was doing. I was able to rhyme, and I don't necessarily rap per se, although I'm moving to that in a little bit. But there is a sense of like when I was little, I wasn't necessarily reading poems or obsessive poems, but I always paid attention to sound. And I think a lot of that has to do with being bilingual, because Spanish is something that I kind of came later in the game. But so I always paid attention to how I put a sentence together. And then because I went to Menlo and I went to Duke and all these predominantly institutions, I started to realize like people don't know our story, and they need to in order to do, and it's a human right that they know it. And I think those things put together, the inclination of language and then my upbringing and the power structure that I started to inhabit, it encouraged me to really use my voice to craft something, to make a narrative.
Got it. In Gentefication,
yeah,
you hold nothing back. Your poems they're intense, they're provocative, they have an autobiographical feel. You're not hesitant to express your emotions. There's love, there's anger, hopelessness, hopefulness. For example, you have this powerful poem you call The First Time I Was Called a Spick. And one of the many poems I was drawn to was your grading rubric. It's on page 68. I picked that for tonight because it's a shorter one. I'd like you to read it for us, to us, and then maybe just talk for a minute about it.
All right, you picked a heck of a poem. All right, sounds
I
good.
love that poem.
I think the beauty of poetry is that it's no longer part of you and it lives somewhere else.
Yes.
And there's power in that. But
yeah.
All right, grading rubric. This book is organized like a syllabus. It's a very nerdy book. So it's a grading rubric. Trauma is weighted as follows. Formal essays. Right children of immigrants, 10%. Double if undocumented. Right first generation, 15%. Mention the color of the Coyote's van, 10%. Keep family in the past tense, 5%. Write birthplace next to its murder per capita rate, 20%. In class, don't correct them when they say your name wrong, 5%. Go by Tony starting sophomore year, 10%. Stay quiet when they make fun of Keisha, 5%. Believe Tim when he says you just got in because you're 10%. When it's your turn to read, pronounce it like they do, Guatemala, 5%. Participation. Turn to the person next to you. Debate your belonging, 10%.
Wow. Wow. Talk to us. Just tell me just about how you came to write that one.
Okay. I think for a long time, I looked at myself as this minority of a minority, and I felt that the only way rich white schools and boards are going to give me a scholarship is if I tell my story in this flashy, urban, in the wire way. And I'm not proud of that. I don't boast about it, but I understand that it was my belief that the only thing people value about what I have to say is not my intellect, but my intellect in spite of what I had to go through. And that's horrible. Like I felt like a stereotype. And a lot of the book is me just grappling with the fact of this gaze about people looking at me a certain way, the way I talk. I remember when I first came into middle school when I was an 8th grade kid, and there was so much about how I dressed, how I talked, my accent, the words I said. And I just remember very immediately, like just putting all that in my pocket. And it's taken me a long time to really find what a natural way for me to talk and navigate spaces. And I'm always camouflaging, right? I'm going to the Senate job. I'm going to Stanford seminar. I'm going to go to the council. And I'm trying to figure out like, okay, what is the me that like I can carry with me that's authentic? So grading rubric is kind of like breaking that shell of saying, I got to just stop caring about how I'm being valued and perceived. And I have to also, these institutions that have given me some modicum of resource, it's not sustainable for me to be this token. And I think the poem is acknowledging like that was an era of my life. And I'd like to think that I'm in a position that where I not only realize it, but I can push past it and just open the space up for more of us. So that way we can be different things, ballet, engineer, artists, intellectuals, and not just be the only one. And that's where we are. And I think I talked to my girl about this the other, recently. I was like, that's the tough part of being a Black first or a brown first. We celebrate it, but it's actually really tough because then you got to be the one who represents everybody, you, the United Nations. And that's just not fair. And so grading rubric is me trying to just unchain myself from all that toxic mentality.
It's fantastic. It certainly resonated with me, and I'm many years older than you. And I went through all of that stuff in your poem. One last comment I want to make to you, Antonio, is that East Palo Alto is where I got my start. And after graduating from Stanford Law School, I couldn't get hired by any corporate law firms. They would not hire me. So I had to make a way where it seemed there was no way. And my way was by opening my own law practice in East Palo Alto. And this was in 1975. I think maybe it's the year you were born. The community, almost entirely then of color, embraced me. So the city has a special place in my heart. And when you write in your book of poetry, I remember there's a poem on page 34. It's called Triptych of the Adobe Kata Army. And you specifically call out East Palo Alto in that poem. It's a little long to read tonight, but I just appreciate you for embracing the city and in doing it in your poetry. So thank you. I'm going to go now to Joanna Ho. Your books are beautifully illustrated by Dong Ho, who lives in Vietnam. And I said books because you have many books. And the one I just read, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, a New York Times bestseller. I'm so jealous. So how did that collaboration happen? How did you work with her? You two have the same last name, but I don't know if that means you're related or not. Probably not. So talk to us about that collaboration.
The way it works in picture books is basically I write the manuscript and I give it, it's a long process until it gets acquired, etc. So when it's acquired, I work with the editor to revise the manuscript, but I'm not the illustrator. And so essentially once I turn in the manuscript, it's out of my hands. The editor finds the illustrator, and every once in a while I get an update. I would get, this was my very, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners was my first book. They're not all illustrated by Dong, but the Eyes books are. Every book sort of has its own, artist. And so in this particular case, the editor found it's Young Ho, and she just, she sent me some samples like, this is who we're thinking about. What do you think? And I, as someone who has as growing up, I almost never saw books with Asian characters. And when I did see them, they were all very stereotypically, very cartoonish, very harmfully illustrated. And so I was very nervous. And the editor also is Asian. But when I saw her art, I just was like, yeah, like this is more than I could have imagined. But then really it's out of your hands. And so it's really this thing where I think a picture book is this incredible collaboration of artists. And there's something really beautiful about having to step back and just let your baby go and see where other people interpret your words and see the layers and the meaning that are added. That it's just like something really beautiful where, like you really understood what I was saying and you added your own story on top of it, and it made it that much richer. So every few months I would see sketches. Then like a few months later, it would be color illustrations. And I would maybe give a little feedback along the way, but each time you just see like the words coming to life in this way. And even after it was already published, there were things I was like discovering about the art that I didn't know were in there, like layers of meaning. I can share one. So if you look, here, I'll show you really fast. Sorry, there go all my books.
It's all right.
Look at just the end papers. They're yellow, and my favorite color is yellow. But I thought, maybe the illustrator went on Instagram and like stalked me and figured out my favorite color is yellow. Turns out they're yellow because of a dress that Constance Wu wore to one of the events for Crazy Rich Asians, and she wore this yellow. If you don't know, Crazy Rich Asians was the first movie with an all-Asian cast in over 25 years. So up until that point, there were 2 movies my whole life with an all-Asian cast. And if you know anything about the history, the yellow fever, yellow peril, the color yellow has been a color that has been used to denigrate, to justify the oppression of people of Asian, background. It was actually came together. I have learned a German Kaiser had a dream about Asian people attacking and taking over his country. And he had that dream put as a painting and then copies of it sent to leaders around the world. And that is where the word yellow peril comes from.
Wow.
And that is why Constance Wu wore this yellow dress, to reclaim the color yellow as one of power and of beauty. And that's why these flowers are yellow. And so when I say that it's this like magical thing to see your art worked on with a team who really understands, it like really becomes something that grows into even beyond something I could have imagined on my own.
Wow. I have another question for you, but I would remind people, if you have any comments or any questions for these wonderful, brilliant authors, just put it in the chat and we'll get to it. So Joanna, hate crimes against Asian Americans have skyrocketed in this country. How have these crimes impacted your students when you teach in East Palo Alto. And was this book, and particularly I'm talking about Eyes That Kiss in the Corners, was this book at all motivated by the rise in anti-Asian violence?
Yeah, I think that, so the way that publishing works for children's books and picture books especially, I wrote this book in 2016, and it was published just last year. So all of the books that exist currently in the world were written many, many years ago, before Stop Asian Hate became a term. That's the first time my whole life that anti-Asian racism has been a topic of public discussion, even though it has very much been a part of the history and fabric of this country. So in terms of the stories, I think that it's public conversation, but it's not new reality. And so these stories are just inspired by living in life. Like, these are my truth, just the same as everyone else is writing their truth. We just never talk about it. In terms of how it's impacted my students, I think that my students are constantly, I'm not from EPA, but I also started my career in EPA. I've been teaching and working in EPA for a long time. And my students are constantly, they're inspiration. So I can just tell one story. Last year, very soon, before the attacks in Atlanta happened, my book had come out just a few months earlier. And before Atlanta happened, I'm one of my students who is just an incredible community leader. He started his own nonprofit because the young people in his apartment complex didn't have anything to do after school. He has a website that I thought, when I first looked at his thing, I thought he was working and volunteering at this nonprofit. And then I found out later, he started the thing and he runs this after school program for children. And he invited me and a few other Asian teachers to come to speak during AAPI Heritage Month. The day before it happened, the day before the speaking event, it was Atlanta happened. And the next day came. And it was just this beautiful thing where I realized our youth are so wise and they are so with it and they are so conscious in ways that I wish I would have been when I was in school. And he brought they knew and they were aware. And I feel like that meant more to me than all the texts and the messages, knowing that my students are thinking about how I'm doing and how the other East Asian staff members were doing. And that they had brought together this team and this group of people that represented all of the different races and cultures in EPA and brought them together. I felt like that was the hope I needed after Georgia and after Atlanta, to know there is a generation that is rising up. These are our kids, and these kids are going to change the world. Young adults, I should say. So I feel like in terms of how is it impacting, I feel like they take it and they want to create change and they want to work in solidarity. And that is the most beautiful thing.
Right. So one last question on your book, and then we're going to take what I call a commercial break, and we're going to have somebody come on and talk a little bit more about YCS and the fundraising. So this book, and one other you have, but this book in particular focuses on the eyes. Mm-hmm. And for Asian Americans who are, and I don't know exactly how to oftentimes Indians are labeled as Asian, but that's not the group that I'm talking about. I'm talking about Asians that where the eyes are perhaps the most obvious feature right off the bat. So there are Asian celebrities who've undergone double eyelid surgery to look more Anglo-ish, Jackie Chan, news anchor Julie Chen. So is the desire to look more American an issue for Asian Americans?
I would say the issue to look more white is an issue. And I think that also has a history of, it's all rooted in white supremacy. The idea of a white beauty standard, the idea of equating dark skin with being less human and thus justifying slavery, the idea of using an East Asian person's eyes and drawing them like slits, and you just have to look at the political cartoons to see using them as a way to demonize, to dehumanize East Asian people to then justify things like exclusion, to justify like murder and violence and all of the, I mean, it's a history that I feel like all of our collective ancestors have faced. It's a story that repeats. And so, yes, there is a reason we have been socialized to believe that beauty looks a certain way. And that is a way that has now been sold across the world. I mean, skin lightening cream, eyelid surgery is the most popular surgery in many Asian countries. And it's about looking whiter because we have been sold this belief. And it's about power and about who has power and how we maintain power. And so I feel like for me, the book on the surface it's about recognizing, understanding through our families and our history, and knowing that our physical features are one thing that are passed down, but within that represents like the history and the beauty of our cultures. But if you really look at the text, if you start off at the beginning and you look at things that reference like eyes like sapphire lagoons and lashes with lace trim on ball gowns, that is very much referencing Disney princesses and the way that is part of this system. And if you look in all the books, I feel like you can analyze and see this book isn't just about like, I feel good about who I am. It's really asking you to analyze and deconstruct and then disrupt those systems.
It's terrific. I am blown away by all three of you. I'm just telling you that right now. And I'm just so glad you're doing what you're doing. We're going to take a break. I'm not sure who's going to come in now. We're going to talk a little bit more. Your responses so we can cover as many as possible. So go ahead, Maura.
First of all, I know it's hard for the authors to see what's in the chat, but there have been lots and lots and lots of kudos. So thank you. Huge, lots of hearts, lots of wows, lots of people saying they want to buy your books. So we really appreciate your sharing today. We have some specific questions, which I'll throw out, and then I think your questions for the group would probably be great. So Leonor is asking, Antonio, have you also written in Spanish?
Yeah, thank you, Maura, and thank you, Leonor, for the question. Yeah, I think, to quote Gloria and Saldua, we speak English, Spanish, and Spanglish. There are poems that definitely steep more into Spanish. There are poems that are more using academic English, but there's also a third language, the language that we formed. And I'm sure Victoria and Joanna and Judge can appreciate, like, we take a language and then we mess with it, we funk it up. So I've yet to write complete Spanish poems, but I'm getting there. So stay tuned.
Great. And a question for Joanna. What ages do you write for? I have 2 granddaughters and I'm trying to get them books that give them a wide perspective of the world and their possibilities.
My picture books are generally ages 4 to 8, although I really believe picture books are for everyone. And my young adult novel coming out, I think, would be probably like upper middle school to high school. Although the statistics also say that the largest readers of YA are high school kids and middle-aged women. So there you have it.
Interesting.
And the third question I'm going to pose to Tonga Victoria, because I happen to know you're self-published, and some others might be as well, but have you ventured into self-publishing in any way or considered other forms of collaboration with artists, musicians, performance, or theater? I am in awe of all of you. Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know what the question was.
So I think they're asking if you're self-published and have you thought of collaborating with artists, musicians, performers, or theater?
Yes, I have collaborated, I think last year, on different media outlets, podcasters, and then also just cultural practitioners within our own community who do dance, song composition, drumming, instrumental, all of those things. Yes.
And Judge Cordell, I think I want to pass it back to you.
That's fine. That's fine. I've got more questions for all three. This is a question for all three of you. It's about the writing process. I'm curious about where you write and when you write, what time of day. So I have the luxury of writing every day. It took me a year to write my book. I wrote every day, 4 to 5 hours in the afternoon. I have to exercise in the morning, get something to eat, and then I sit and write. And I have a space actually where I'm sitting right now, where I did my writing. But because I'm retired, I didn't have to worry about, oh, I got a day job and have to do all this. And my kids are grown and out of the house. So I have the quiet. So I'm curious, you young folk, where do you write and what time of day? And I'll start with Tonga Victoria.
Sure. I can speak to the writing process of Hyphen American. I actually wrote that on sabbatical in 2019 in Tonga. So in my whae tangata, my mother's brother's home, I got to write that. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any ties to the real world of the rat race. And so I was able to get that done. Now I don't know when I write. But when it happens, I'm like, oh, here we go. I got some pages in.
So when you were on your own and I'm sorry, when you on sabbatical, what time of day did you write?
Oh, it was when the wind was the strongest. That was when I was writing. Yeah.
All right. What about Joanna?
I write and very late at night, early in the morning before work. I'm also a single mom, so on the weekends that my kids are with their dad, I close myself in the house most of the time, and I write all weekend. But I write either on the couch, I write on the bed when my son is like next to me, and I'm like shielding the computer light from his eyes. But I feel like it feels like something I have to do, so I make time.
Well, Antonio.
I write during the special presentations for the council. I'm just kidding. When the slide goes up and Patrick does his thing, I'm totally joking. I'm joking. It's a joke. It's tough. It's tough because it used to be like back in the day, well, more back in the day, I used to be like Joanna was saying, like a night owl. But now because I'm a responsible grown-er adult, I have responsibilities. And they call me to be 9 to 5 or in class. I have my schedule changes a lot because of my job with the Senate, and then my Stanford's on a quarter. So it's when I got pockets of time. A lot of times what happens is I'm at the gym listening to Pusha T or listening to Kid Cudi or something, and then I'll get like a rhyme in, or like a line distills itself from the day. And I have to follow that thread. And luckily the poetic form allows you to kind of enter it a little more easily than maybe a novel. I could imagine, at least. I'm not a novelist. So kind of similar to Joanna, sometimes it's late at night. When I get a good weekend morning and there's not like a rally or an event or a extracurricular, then I get my poems in. But a lot of times I'm thinking about them and I have my little notebook on my phone to give me at least a trail to follow. Even if I'm not in that imaginative pocket, I can follow it back when I'm not busy, when I have some time.
Do the three of you have to have it absolutely quiet when you're writing? Because I know some people can write and only write when they have music going in the background, for example. So just jump in. Do you have to have it quiet or what?
Yes, for me, yes.
It has to be totally quiet, or I have to be like with ambient noise, like if I'm at a coffee shop or something. But I can't do music when I'm writing.
Interesting. What about you, Antonio?
Again, it used to be like hip hop was like the engine. And then I found that the voice actually did crowd what I was trying to say. And now I want to figure out, like, what does Antonio, the speaker, like want to flesh out? And it did kind of disturb the organic dictation that was, that I was echoing from me. So yeah, no music anymore.
Interesting. Am I right to assume for all three of you that you all use a computer? Nobody's writing longhand or paper, or not? Okay, so
All computer for me.
Joanna, what did you say?
It's all computer for me.
Okay.
Only on the computer.
Sometimes when the white glare becomes a bit too much, I do shorthand, but oftentimes I do feel comfortable just typing.
Got it.
Yeah, no, obviously for the long form stuff, when I've got the outline going, I'm for the computer, but there's something about a pen and a paper that just, I feel more connected to the story, more connected to the characters. So that's for sure, like, first stage of brain dumping is with a paper and pen.
Interesting. So a question for all three. Who are your favorite authors or poets? Besides me, I mean, obviously. Okay, so Tonga Victoria, What authors do you like?
I mean, I'll just speak as of recently, and I know I gave you your praises, Judge Cordell.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Do it again. But your book, absolutely. I've been into a lot of the self-help professional development books, especially for what I'm studying right now. I think I'm not even going to try and butcher the name, but yeah, things of that sort right now in this season.
Interesting. Okay. Antonio?
Yeah, I don't necessarily make the distinction, but just for people's reference, there's the sort of poems, the poems that are considered proper poems, like poems that are read as poems in a community, and then what I feel are poems, right? Okay. So like formal poetry, Baraka, right? It's Nation Time, Ginsberg, Howe, Denez Smith, a lot of contemporary. It's a beautiful time to write poetry because it's never been more Black, more brown, more queer, more progressive than it is right now with Amanda Gorman. It's just a beautiful golden age. And then I would say, like, there are poems that aren't considered poems, but I deem them poetic. Like Paletero guy selling his produce. Like when I went to Anaheim for the Tonga concert, like just like that whole thing was fire. Like it was just a beautiful scene, and the flags and then people dancing. Like to me, that's a poem, right? Because a poem at the end of the day is an emotional sport. Like you have to feel compelled to write into it. And anything that catalyzes that, to me, is a poem. That's my definition. You won't get it from Oxford or Merriam-Webster, but that's Antonio's definition.
I like that definition. Joanna?
I can say I think authors who have influenced me that I really admire are Jacqueline Woodson, Kwame Alexander, Jason Reynolds, Margarita Engel. They just write incredibly powerful, lyrical, beautiful work. But I really do feel like people who are in the kidlit space who are critical and conscious are really critical, very conscious, and then they write it in story in such a powerful way.
Yes. So we have about 2 minutes left, and I want to use the 2 minutes to ask each of you to give advice to young people who may be attending this program, who want to write or maybe are thinking about it or maybe haven't thought about it at all. What advice do you give to young people to interest them in writing and expressing themselves on paper? And so we'll wrap it up with that, and then I'll make a final comment. So who would like to go first? You can just raise your hand. And all right, Joanna.
I can go first. I think it's just know the stories that you have to tell matter and that you have stories to tell, and then do the dang thing. Like just write the story, because in the face of everything that is going to come at you, that's going to tell you your story is not good, is that it's not written well, like all the things. I can tell you this book, it was on submission for almost 2 years and it was just getting rejected across the board for a long time. Like you just have to know that you are powerful and that your stories matter and the world needs them, period.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. Tonga.
I say necessity is the mother of invention. That's something that I've literally lived with these past 2 years. If you're not going to do it, who else is going to do it? And really just take courage. Take courage.
Thank you. Antonio.
I say start with your environment. Don't worry about what a poem is or is not, what a piece of art form is or is not. Our educational system is still growing because the people in it are still learning about how to best serve our students. So whatever you think is not in a classroom doesn't mean it's not meant to be there. And that includes you. So write what you need to write. It don't got to be elegant. It don't got to be perfect syntax. It's just what you wish you knew years before that God or your family or higher power, whatever you believe in, is now seeding in you now. So just as we were saying, write it and start with what you know.
Let me say to the three of you, I'm honored to be in your Zoom presence. And I hope that one day, since I have your books, that I'll be able to get you to sign my books. And I say this to you all and to all the attendees, that I live my life by, it's the words of Alice Walker. And she said this, she said, activism is my rent for living on this planet. And I say to you three authors, you have definitely paid your rent. I say to Leif Erikson, to all the folks at YCS, you are paying your rent. You have paid your rent and continue to do so. So I say to all of us in attendance, be kind, and every day, please pay your rent. I'll turn it back to Maura or whomever.
Thank you, Judge Cordell. That was beautiful. People in the chat are thanking you and thanking all of our speakers today. So I know we've gone a little over. Thank you everyone for staying with us. That was a really inspiring evening, and I really appreciate everyone being here. We are gonna have a surprise. We're giving away copies of all 4 books through a special game that Harish is going to run for us, and we're going to run it really short. It's just going to be a minute long, and then I'll say my thank yous, and then we will wrap up for this evening. So I'm going to pass this to Harish. Thank you.
Thanks, Mora. So the rules of the game are simple. The last person today to pledge $20 wins signed copies of the 4 books by Judge Cordell, Tonga Victoria, Joanna Ho, and Antonio Lopez. So this is your chance. Mora said it's a minute, but it's not exactly a minute. So we don't know when precisely the game ends. So let's just get the $20 pledges coming in. Let's try to see if we can get to $35,000. Kiran, again, thank you. Masia Pugsley, the books are yours if you are the last to donate. So you can donate multiple times. Oh my gosh, there's bidding wars going on. I can't keep track of who's winning. Francis Morse is winning it as of now. Come on, we got this. Oops. Sherry Sager's winning right now. Okay, can we keep it coming? Carrie Wagner, the books are yours unless someone steps in. This is your chance, folks. Megan Fogarty gets it back. Sally Bemis gets it now. It's Sally's. Now it's Karen's. Nope, it's Leafs. Okay. This is an all-out war, folks. The books are Leafs unless... No, the books are Nancy's. I'm sorry. The book... Okay. This is ferocious, folks. We got this going. No one knows exactly when the clock is going to stop. So your chance to win the books is maximized just by pledging $20 over and over again. Folks, let your hearts pour out. $20 is barely the cost of a burrito and a drink plus tip. It's going to Parag for $20. Nope, it's going to Sherry for $20. Okay, it's going to Sherry. Folks, I'm going to start ringing the bell because it could be a minute anytime now. Nope, it's going to John. It's going to Sherry again. John again. Okay. I have lost track. We're at 34,185. Folks, can we get to 35,000 in the next few seconds, or even 34,500? All we need is everyone who's bid $20 right now to just bid $20 again. So we've got, Leaf. Oh, Sherry. Okay. It's coming. It keeps coming. Hazel's getting the books for, I don't know how many pledges they have made so far, but okay. Megan is the winner as of now, $20. Sherry gets it for $20. And when I say gets it for $20, it means $20 plus all the previous pledges, just so we are clear on the rules. Sally is the current winner unless someone steps in. And Sally is the winner. Congratulations, Sally. Okay, and we raised 34,385. Over to Mura.
Thank you so much for that fun game. And Sally, congratulations. When we actually practiced this with Paybe, which has been a wonderful platform to work with, Sally won this then in our virtual world. So I'm glad she won it this time. So thank you, Sally. Sally Bemis, you've been an amazing board member. And we are grateful for all you've done to make this a successful event. A huge thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening. Gratitude to our special guests. A special thank you to Judge Cordell, who has been an amazing partner through all of the planning, and of course, all of our wonderful authors as well, our event sponsors, participants, and donors. Thank you to our YCS board, staff, and volunteers. We couldn't do what we do without you. And most importantly, thank you to our youth for all you do to make the world a better place. We will be sending a recording of tonight's event, and we invite you to please share this wonderful evening with your networks. And thank you for your generous support today. This was the beginning of our spring fundraiser, and you've helped us tremendously get so close to our goal. So we thank you. And We thank you for helping YCS to engage with youth in meaningful service in our community. So with that, we're going to close this evening, and I want to wish everyone good night and stay safe out there. Thank you so much.